What's up, everybody? We've got a new one starting today. The jury has been picked in the Jessy Kurczewski trial. We're going to have to work on that. It is known as the eye drop trial. Eye drops used as poison. The state alleges that the defendant did this to intentionally end the life of the victim in this case. And today was opening statements. We are in front of Judge Doro again, the Daryl Brooks judge, one of the channel's favorite. I actually can't remember if she was voted the favorite judge overall by the channel. I should go back and check out that Members Only Live where you guys voted on the judges. But there are some very wild allegations, so we're going to jump right into it. If you guys are interested in this trial specifically, let me know by liking the video and subscribing to our page. If you don't, let me know in the comments and we can move on to the next trial that's going on. And I can focus in on what content you guys are all most interested in. So this is a case with 2 counts of theft before and after the victim's life ended, and also with the first degree ending the life of the victim. And the state puts out a timeline that they're going to explain. But they said overlaid on that timeline of the actions of theft, ending the life, and theft, there are so many lies told by the defendant, including the defendant's own words that she gave the victim a bottle of water laced with the Visine, and she knew that the Visine would cause the end of her life. She lied to her boyfriend about things. She lied at the scene about not knowing what happened, but the medical examiner came, said it looked staged, like it was suicide. But nobody, there was like pill powder on the victim's shirt. The defendant called and was there and found the victim, but nobody really thought the victim would have done this. Nothing in her life was really indicating this, according to the state. And they really focused on the defendant's lies. And as you know, one of the biggest pieces of evidence in any case is the defendant's own words. And the most damning things that can come back to haunt you are your own words. Well, the defendant apparently had a lot of different versions of what happened. First saying she had nothing to do with it, then apparently admitting that the victim wanted to end her own life and the defendant maybe helped with it or gave her the water laced with Visine. But let's hear the prosecutor explain a lot of these lies. It's kind of the end of his opening statement, and then we will hear from the defense and what their defense is going to be as witnesses begin to get called today in this trial.
Brings us to the lies. And this goes on for a number of slides, and I promise you, I pared these down for opening statements. You're going to hear a number of others as this trial goes. But
this ain't even all the lies, he says.
It's kind of that second timeline I'm talking about that goes back now and sort of lays over the bare bones.
That's the defendant.
But in March of 2018, Detective Plennis and I are going to show you and talk a lot about clearly altered bank documents where Ms. Kurczewski changed the name of the account holder to Lynn, changed the yearly earnings, changed any reference to spendings at Sal's Palace and Potawatomi, all to get a $30,000 loan in Lynn Hernan's name, but went in to Jessy Kurczewski's account. You're going to see that it went in on March 8th of 2018. That same day, Jessy Kurczewski adds Lynn Hernan to her bank account as a secondary user, obviously so that this loan in Lynn Hernan's name can go into that account. Furthermore, in spring of 2018, and you're going to hear, and Scott Craig is the former boyfriend of Jessy Kurczewski. He was the boyfriend of Ms. Kurczewski until July 9th of 2019 when she was arrested. He'll tell you that he knew of Lynn, knew who Lynn Hernan was, thought it was a woman that Jessy Kurczewski helped care for, a family friend of Jessy Kurczewski, but he never met her. And in spring of 2018, Ms. Kurczewski tells her boyfriend, who she's living with, who they've been in a relationship for 3 years, she tells him that Lynn is in a coma at Freighter Hospital. That's sometime in spring of 2018, he remembers.
Which is just not true. Again, that's kind of the theme here, is all these lies. And if you become a lying liar who lies, as we've seen in so many cases, it is so hard to overcome that, because now the jury can't believe anything you say, anything your lawyer says. Your side of the case becomes so difficult if the state can prove you lied over and over again to official documents, on loan documents, stealing money, lying to your loved ones. Why should we believe you now? And the state is really setting that up in this case.
Scott Craig will tell you that he believed on October 3rd, 2018, when Ms. Kurczewski tells him over the phone that Lynn has passed away, Scott Craig believed that Jessy Kurczewski was at Freighter Hospital in Lynn's hospital room. He remembers feeling bad, but ultimately not surprised, because he thought this woman had been in a coma for 5 months, and that it was sort of a natural outcome. Ms. Kurczewski never came clean to Scott Craig. It wasn't until July of 2019 when detectives show up at his door and tell him that Lynn Hernan did not die in Freighter Hospital. She was not in a coma for 5 months. And you'll hear a jail call between Ms. Kurczewski that she makes to her boyfriend a few days after her arrest, Scott Craig, where he's furious. that she lied to him about such a huge thing. And you'll hear her try to say, it's only one thing. It's only one thing. What's the big deal? On October 3rd, as we talked about, she's using Lynn Hernan's credit cards. Even after giving her this bottle of poison, she's opening up a JCPenney card. She's using that JCPenney card immediately after opening it, about 10:30 in the morning. We move to October 8th of 2018. She goes and picks up Lynn Hernan's jewelry from the medical examiner's office, and within 2 weeks is selling 3 pieces of jewelry to Robert Hack. And what's interesting about this is that Robert Hack makes you declare how long you've owned an item before they're just going to let you sell it. Right? They don't want people just taking things that aren't theirs and coming in and selling it and getting the money. Ms. Kurczewski fills out 3 separate forms saying one of these items that she picked up 2 weeks ago, she's owned for 2.5 months. Another one that says she owned it for 3 or 3.5 months. And the third piece, she says she's owned for 6 months.
So again, just blatant, flat out lies to get money, greed, theft, all these same kind of motives and things that we've seen. It's a tale as old as time. They don't have to prove motive, which he says in this opening statement, but money and greed is definitely going to be a motive that they focus on. Additionally, as some background, the victim and the defendant were very close, family, friends. The defendant treated the victim basically like, the victim treated the defendant like her daughter. The defendant was the caretaker for the victim. The defense goes more into this and really builds on their relationship, so we'll talk about it more. But it was a little colder of an opening for the state, basically saying she trusted them. She had 2 groups of friends. The defendant and her mom were one of the groups of friends of the victim. Then there was a different group of friends. The victim had no children, so the defendant and then one other son of one of her other friends in that group were the beneficiaries on her account, and she had a couple $100,000, things like that, that she was going to leave to them anyways, which again is interesting to think why you would commit this theft if the money was coming to you. Maybe you got impatient, but again, we'll save that for the defense's opening statement.
Moving to later in October and early November of 2018, you're going to see that there's even more credit card activity for Lynn Hernan's credit cards, weeks after she's dead. In January of 19, here's another big one that involves Scott Craig. He wakes up one day to hear from Ms. Kurczewski, who went out the night before. There's a big text message conversation where she's claiming she feels very sick and thinks she was drugged at the bar last night. She elaborates and she goes on to say, I had to go to the hospital. This is very serious. And she says, in January of 2019, and it's important to know that Dr. Bidzricki had not yet made a determination of the cause of death to be tetrahydrozoline poisoning. And the detectives had not told Ms. Kurczewski what that cause of death was because it hadn't been made yet. And yet here she is telling her boyfriend that she's at the hospital and the doctors had her run tests and that she is found to have been poisoned by tetrahydrozoline. She doesn't say.
And that's what's found in Visine in the eye drops. We're going to continue to just say eye drops probably for the most part, because that's what's found in those that they said is the cause of death, which just wait till we hear from the defendant a little bit on what they think about that.
Eye drops. She doesn't say Visine. She says they found tetrahydrozoline in my system. She tells her boyfriend that this is serious. This can kill you.
So how does she know that it's serious? How does she know that it can kill you? How does she know that it's even poison? I wouldn't necessarily think that if I drank eye drops, that would kill me or I'd be poisoned. I don't know what you guys think. Let me know in the comments.
In July, fast forward to July 9th of 2019.
By the way, if anybody thinks this is too fast, you can hit the settings wheel and slow it down to 0.75 speed or 0.5 speed or whatever you want, as slow or fast as you want to listen to it.
Detectives now tell Ms. Kurczewski that Lynn died of tetrahydrozoline poisoning. She seems shocked and then says, I didn't even know you could die from that. Months after telling her boyfriend, this is serious, you can die from this. Next to February, June of 2019, the police will tell you all about how they go through people's phones. They went through Scott Craig's phone. They went through Jessy Kurczewski's phones. They went through some other phones, and they download them. And they're good at getting everything they can, including some deleted things. And lo and behold, on Ms. Kurczewski's phone, between February and June of 2019, they find a number of documents that she deleted from her phone. The subjects are, quote, criminal poisoning, cyanide poisoning, and household poisons. Those all show in the phone download.
The old Google searches, I mean, they've got a lot of elements in this case. That doesn't look good for the defendant, but the defendant does have a theory, a real theory that I think could hold weight in this case. As good as the state's opening is and really laying everything out and piling on all the other bad acts and lies and reasons why you can't trust this defendant, just wait till we hear what the defense is.
That they were accessed. I mean, somebody opened them on her phone in July of 2018.
Somebody.
Moving to April of 2019. Anthony Poza, who I told you earlier, was like sort of an adopted son to Lynn. He's the other beneficiary. Yeah, this is the other adopted son, basically, of the victim. Lynn is the victim. He's the other beneficiary of all of her, her estate. Beneficiary on the will. So Ms. Kurczewski has to run everything by him, and he has to sign off on things before she can close the estate. He feels like something's off. He doesn't think something's right, and he asks to see receipts. And a few weeks later, Ms. Kurczewski sends him 52 pages of receipts or invoices. Detective Plennis will talk to you at length about how he went through each one of them. Some of our witnesses will be very fast witnesses who will look at a receipt or an invoice that was given to Anthony Poza, and they will tell you this is not our company's invoice at all. This is completely made up. Detective Plennis looked into all the financials. If Ms. Kurczewski claimed to pay off a credit card of Lynn Hernan, Detective Plennis looked at it and found it to be false. Almost all of these 52 pages are completely false documents that were given to Anthony Poza by Ms. Kurczewski, conveniently about a month or less after she purchased Adobe Acrobat on one of her credit cards. I will show you. Finally, more lies. When she talks to detectives in both March and July of 2019, her story changes a number of times. And detective.
So basically what that was there's a probate process. The other beneficiary said, I need some receipts for some of this not lining up. So she just makes up a bunch of fake stuff, submits it. The detective goes through it. It's all bogus. Again, not making you look good, going to hurt your credibility, going to go a long way negatively with the jury.
Poppy is going to tell you all about those. But even on the scene, I told you before, her initial statement to the scene officer, who just said point blank, you called this in, Ms. Kurczewski, you're friends with Lynn Hernan. Do you think this could be a suicide? She doesn't say, yes, absolutely. Lynn was suicidal for a long time, and what a tragic ending. She says, I don't. Yes and no. I don't think she'd leave her cats.
So again, the state kind of glosses over this, but I wanted to pause here because we're going to hear the defense highlight this. If they, and the state makes it seem like they were just kind of asking her flippantly, the defense makes it seem like they thought initially it was a suicide. And so why wouldn't the defendant just jump on that theory if she was trying to cover something up or prove that it wasn't her? Why wouldn't she just jump on that theory and say, yeah, she's been suicidal for a long time? Why would she be honest there? Like the prosecutor's basically saying, you know, she even said it probably wasn't suicide. Why would she be honest if she was trying to set this up? It's just, it is an interesting thought process as to, it's a very good opening statement, but I don't think it's going to be as clean as he's laying it out to be.
In March of 2019, she writes an email to one of the detectives on the case and says in that email, she has a hard time believing Lynn would commit suicide. Okay. Now, July of 2019, she's arrested. She's told this is a poisoning and that police now know the medical examiner is deemed as a homicide and they don't think it's a suicide. Now, Ms. Kurczewski starts claiming that Lynn was suicidal for months leading up to October of 2018.
So once she gets arrested, she starts changing and talking about how it might be suicide. So now is she just CYA or what's going on? Why didn't she just go with this theory from the jump? Did she think that I don't see how saying it's not that she was not suicidal, that the victim was not suicidal helps her if she knew what she did in this case, right? I understand why she would flip and say it's suicide after she gets arrested. Sure. Because now she's trying to create a defense, but why would she not just go with that from the jump?
Still denies help in any way or knowing anything about Visine many times.
So first, ultimately, she denies helping in any way. That changes. Now, when your story changes, why tell the big lie like the Murdoch case? It's going to be very tough to overcome for this defendant, regardless of what the defenses are. Very tough to overcome lies like this.
Her story changes again. She says, okay, well, one time I put 2 drops of Visine in a glass of water for her because I just knew that she was drinking Visine. But that's it. That's all. So ultimately, stating, again, that quote, she finally gave that water bottle, knowing it had, in the defendant's estimation, 6 bottles of Visine to Lynn Hernan, knowing it could kill her. Walks out of that condo unit, closes the door, and goes shopping on Lynn's dime. And then that leads into a law enforcement goose chase, I'll call it, where Detective Hoppy will tell you, I suspect with some frustration in his voice, about more lies Ms. Kurczewski told law enforcement. Starting with, you guys, there's a recording from Lynn, there's suicide letters, there's all this evidence that'll show I'm not guilty of any of this. There's evidence out there. There's evidence out there. It starts with this storage shed. She says, check a storage shed. Detective Hoppy says, where's the storage shed? And very quickly, Ms. Kurczewski goes, kind of laughing, says, there was never a storage shed. I was going to get a storage shed, never did, but that's what I was going to, but there's no storage shed.
More lies. Again, big lies about how all this evidence that I didn't do it exists here. It's in a storage shed. Storage shed doesn't exist.
So next, she tells Detective Hoppy, we have to check a BMO Harris bank lockbox. And the detectives do. They did before, and they learn that it's empty. There's nothing in there. They also learn that
you can imagine how law enforcement feels about her when she sends them on these wild goose chases, lying about things that don't exist to try to cover her butt, and they just aren't true.
Jessy and her mom, Jennifer Flower, were the last ones to access that bank box, and just so happened to do so on October 4th, 2018, the very day after Lynn died. So when Ms. Kurczewski is telling Detective Hoppy to check the lockbox, she already knows it's empty because she was there, and she was the last one there the day after Lynn died. So that doesn't work. So she now changes to say, well, I buried a lot of stuff in Whitnall Park, kind of by the Nature Center. And Detective Hoppy will tell you that another detective was out there in Whitnall Park with a metal detector and a shovel. They're trying to use video access to have Ms. Kurczewski tell us where in the world we find these things. Spoiler alert, they found nothing. There was no magical hole at Whitnall Park. Just more lies from Ms. Kurczewski. And finally, in November of 2019, Ms. Kurczewski is removed by the court as personal representative of Lynn's estate, mostly because of this investigation. She takes that and says, well, now there's a real will I have to file. Almost a year to the day almost, of filing the actual original will. It's notarized by two impartial people. Ms. Kurczewski now files a, quote, real will. And wouldn't you believe, it removes Anthony Poza as a beneficiary. You're going to hear from Paul Nowakowski, the Register and Probate of Waukesha County, and you're going to hear from Beth Taylor, an attorney who's done probate work for 25 years. They have never seen somebody file a quote-unquote real will a year after. And they've certainly never heard it being done as a test. That's what Ms. Kurczewski says. She says, I filed that will originally, and this was all a test Anthony Poza was supposed to pass. And he failed because he questioned what I spent things on. And lo and behold, she tries to leave herself as the sole beneficiary of what's left of the estate that she stole from. Just more lies. That leads me, and I think this is my second to last slide. But when we look at all those facts and circumstances, when you're talking about what was Ms. Kurczewski's intent, did she have that intent to kill?
I'm interested in that. Again, not to just try to poke holes here, but that's the best he has, is that somebody's going to say, oh, I've never seen that before as a will. That's all we got. We have no other proof that that's fake, fraudulent. They have some really good proof on some other stuff that it's fake and fraudulent, like how long she says she owned some of the jewelry, that she went out and spent money on the credit card the day that the victim passed. That didn't seem as strong to me.
And what was her knowledge and intent as related to the theft? Remember, the instruction says you have to look at all the facts and circumstances. And here they are pretty simply, I think. Between January of 16 and October 3rd of 2018, Ms. Kurczewski was able to steal $144,000 plus from Lynn Hernan while she was still alive. Ms. Kurczewski got it to a point where Lynn Hernan, as of October 8, 2018, lost almost all of that $250,000, right? It was down to $87. Now that she's worth nothing, her credit cards are maxed out, her bank account, one of them's at $87, another one's at $52. She's worth nothing, unfortunately, to Ms. Kurczewski. But her estate is valued at approximately $150,000.
So they're saying basically she stole all her money and that's why she got rid of her. But again, on its own, without all the lies and other bad things about this defendant, it seemed like she could have done that with Lynn still living.
And Ms. Kurczewski helps herself to $87,000 of that. Lynn Hernan's murder falls so conveniently for Ms. Kurczewski as to when she could maximize her profit off Lynn Hernan. And this is not a suicide. This was intentional homicide. So I come back to what I told you was the heart of this case, Lynn Hernan. And justice for Lynn Hernan here is 3 guilty verdicts for Jessy Kurczewski. And that's what the state is asking me to return here. Thank you.
All right. So let me grade the state's opening statement there, A, B, C, D, F, because I always like to know what you think. I thought it was pretty good myself. The defense starts out focusing on a presumption of innocence, like we always hear in criminal defense cases like this. They focused a lot on the relationship, loving relationship between the victim and the defendant, how she was basically one of the defendant's victim's adopted daughters, how they loved each other, how the victim loved jewelry and makeup and, doing herself up. But then she really got depressed, started gaining weight, having a lot of issues, and was actually suicidal. And we're going to listen to some of the defendant's opening statement to kind of get an idea of where they're going in the case.
Attorney Galaviz, rephrase.
We'll see. When Lynn passed away, they talk about, and I want you to hold him to this.
Whenever the defense says hold them to this, it really highlights something the state said. Ears should perk up. And he says, hold them to this. This is what they are saying and what they have to prove. And let's hear what he picks to highlight.
When he came up here and said the tetrahydrozoline, the Visine killed Lynn. You hold him to that when he came up here. That's what killed her.
So hold them to that the tetra, whatever, that's in Visine, that's what killed Lynn. Hold them to that. That's absolutely what they said. He said that's the cause of death. That's what the medical examiner said. Lacing the water with Visine. They knew it would kill her. She knew it. That's really the only hand the defendant had in it, was putting the Visine in the water. That's what did it. I was surprised when I heard that that's what the defense attorney told me to make sure as a juror, which I'm not, but to make sure that that's what I hold the state to. I'm like, okay, seems easy enough because, that's all they said killed her. Interesting.
To this day, no one's ever died from Visine, ever, on planet Earth.
That's an interesting fact. And there's no objection yet. To this day, no one has ever died from Visine, ever, on planet Earth. And that's a fact. Oof. That's interesting to me, because if that's not what did it, then how did the defendant cause this death? This isn't a battery case.
No, not one person's ever died from Visine. It's never happened. And I learned during this case, it's kind of like marijuana. You can smoke blunt after blunt after blunt after blunt after blunt, and it can't kill you. The ingredients of marijuana.
He's saying it's so much it is so factual this did not kill her, that it's like smoking a joint. You can smoke 1,000,000 joints and it's not going to kill you. You can drink 6 bottles of Visine apparently and it's not going to kill you. I don't know if it has an effect, like if it's like a purple drink or whatever, you know, like drinking cough syrup or whatever, or smoking a joint, if it has that kind of effect. And that's why people do it. Cause he says like, I don't know why people do what they do, but Lynn, the victim, liked to drink Visine.
I learned it through this case. That you can smoke all day, every day, marijuana, it can't kill you. It does something with your body. And it's like that with Visine. It can't kill you.
Judge, I'm going to object. That's not what any of the evidence is going to come in.
So when he says it can't kill you, that's where the objection comes in. They didn't object when he said it's never killed anybody on planet Earth, but when he says it can't kill you, that's when they object. Judge says to rephrase.
Attorney Galaviz, rephrase.
Well, we'll see.
Your opening statements, not arguments. Say that for your closing.
But when they arrived at the scene, this is what they found at the scene. Clizobenzapine, the one in the middle, I wouldn't be able to say it. Methamphetamine, they found more prescription drugs, empty bottles. A closer look at clizobenzapine, it was empty. More bottles. Baclofen, they found a lot of empty prescription bottles. You know why they're empty? They're inside Lynn. She had about 20.
You know why they're empty? They're inside Lynn, he said, the victim.
25 to 30 prescription pills in her system. And she was only supposed to have 5 or 6.
She had 25 to 30 different prescription pills in her system, and she was only supposed to have 5 or 6. Those toxicology reports are going to be important, and you can't argue with those in black and white. And if she was taking that kind of concoction of pills, and he mentions alcohol later, I'm wondering if they're going to have an expert say that was actually the cause of death. And the state did not mention that one time. They didn't say the defendant had anything to do with any of that. It has to be the eye drops in order for it to be the defendant. Now, if it's a lethal mixture and the eye drops were an important part of that concoction to cause the death, then I think they have enough. But really interesting to think about, you know, overdosing on pills that were not supposed to be in her system with alcohol, a conscious decision made by the victim. That's very different than the state's opening statement, which makes this case really interesting to me. And also, I don't know anything about this case except what I'm hearing in opening statements. I'm coming into this case fresh. So whatever these lawyers are telling me is the first introduction to the facts of this case that I have, besides obviously hearing that that the defendant committed this crime with eye drops. I heard that. That's basically all I knew about this case.
You can't see that as a suicide when you're only supposed to take 5 or 6 and you get about 25 to 30. You know that baclofen she's not even supposed to have in her system. And she had about 10 to 15 of those pills in her system. That clizobenzapine, she wasn't even supposed to have that in her system. And she had about 10 of those pills. That methamphetamine, she was supposed to have that in her system, but not to the volume that she had. She was only supposed to have 1 or 2 in her system. And she had about 7. And you'll hear from people, clizobenzapine kills people.
Sorry, I interrupted him. He said, and you're going to hear that those pills kill people. So Visine, he argues, can't kill people. These pills can. And both were in her system. So what caused the death? It's a pretty valid argument if they can come with the goods, right? If they can come with the goods. We're looking at this balanced. Coming in, presumed innocent. Let's hear if the state has enough to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
It kills people. The methamphetamine kills people. Reported suicides with those 3 pills. And she had a boatload of that in her system.
Reported suicide with that in their system. Very interesting. He talked about how, again, he focused in on their relationship, how Lynn was basically leaving everything to Jessy anyways. Again, he talked about how she got depressed, started gaining weight. And, you know, people knew that. She stopped going out, stopped wearing makeup, stopped wearing jewelry. Everything changed. She wasn't the same person she used to be. Jessy knew that. Jessy's who she would call. Jessy's who she trusted. Jessy's who took care of her. Jessy's the defendant in the case. And Lynn would never think that Jessy had anything to do with this or would want Jessy to get punished for this. She wanted her whole estate to go to Jessy. She loved Jessy. Yes, they did lie on some bank loan documents. He does admit that. But because Jessy and Lynn were doing that together, not just Lynn, not just Jessy. He also showed medical records where Lynn was asking for eye drops, always complaining about dry eyes. Her eyes hurt. She needed more eye drops because she liked to drink them. She did not use them. Interesting. Will they be able to prove it? I don't know, but he's saying it in opening statement. He's laying the roadmap, and I think he is showing a roadmap that could lead to a not guilty verdict if he can prove what he says to poke these holes in the state's case, especially that if Visine cannot physically and scientifically kill a person, it has to be not guilty. Do we agree with that? It has to be not guilty. That's the state's whole case. If it's the concoction of 3 pills he's saying are reported that people use for this action, then I think it's got to be not guilty. Now, will he be able to prove that? I don't think the state would agree. So let's hear kind of the end of his opening, which I think is good to say, like, why would she do something like this? Why would she leave the scene this way if she committed the crime? 452. Jump ahead a few minutes here.
These other baclofen, she wasn't using them. She shouldn't have had baclofen in her system again. She shouldn't have had these drugs, these other drugs. They're basically saying she took these voluntarily, these other 25 to 30 pills. She took those voluntarily, along with the alcohol. But the tetrahydrozoline, no, she didn't take that voluntarily.
So again, they're saying, the state's saying she took the pills voluntarily, drank the alcohol voluntarily, but not the Visine. The defense is arguing that A, the Visine didn't kill her, but B, she drank it all the time voluntarily. Now, are we going to get into nuance where the victim asked the defendant to put some of this in the water and the defendant didn't know it could kill her, and so she just thought it was kind of like giving her marijuana or something like that that helped with the pain? I don't know. There's definitely going to be some nuance and gray area to exactly what happened. But again, I do think he is presenting at least a plausible argument.
That doesn't even make sense. You're saying she took 25 to 30 pills voluntarily? Again, 2 of them that she shouldn't have had in her system, but the Visine did it? Next slide, please. Again, these are all the prescription pills that we found that they were found on the scene. That's just 1 or 2 pages that were found at the scene. Next slide. Also, it doesn't make sense. They're saying that Jessy set this up. You know, remember when officers arrived on the scene? Do you think this was a suicide? Do you think Jessy would be jumping up and down? Yes. It's a suicide.
Makes sense. If they thought it was, why wouldn't she be jumping them down and say, yes, it is?
This is definitely a suicide. Yes. You know what she said? She goes, I don't know. I don't think so. She said, I don't know. You don't want to think the worst, but you know, she would have been saying, yeah, for sure. It was a suicide. Jessy was being honest. I don't know. And you think if she would have set it up, and according to them, the Visine is in that water bottle, why would she leave it there at the scene with her fingerprints all over it?
It's a good point. If she knew how it happened and what she did, and it was planned and intentional, and she wanted to take her out because of the money, because she was of no use to her anymore, why leave the water bottle with all the evidence? Like, she was there before the cops were. Why wouldn't you just get rid of that?
You know, it's like shooting somebody with a gun and then
She
leaving.
didn't get arrested right away. She could have put it in her car and ditched it later, and nobody would have ever known about it. Or I should have said, her fingerprints would have never been on it. So if they found Visine in her system, how would they have proved that Jessy had anything to do with it?
The gun on the scene and run it away so they can find the gun and your fingerprints on it. Why in the world would she leave the bottle of Visine right there so people can find it with their fingerprints on it?
Now, not all criminals are smart, right? We can start there. They make plenty of mistakes, but I think it's a plausible argument if she was really trying to concoct this and set all this up.
If that was actually what killed her. Next slide, please. I want to touch a little bit about the finances, and they're going to mention about these checks.
And we don't need to get into the finances at this point, but basically he admits some of it. But at the very end, he does say, she is innocent, so find her not guilty, which I think is interesting. When you're trying to prove innocence, it's almost like you're raising the bar and now you're trying to prove something as opposed to poking the holes in what the state's doing. But it's not always a bad argument if you feel like you have the goods and can absolutely disprove the state's one and only theory, which is that they're not saying that she also shoved a bunch of pills down her throat or forced her to do that or anything like that. They are just claiming the Visine, and we'll find out why, right? When we hear testimony, is it about the fingerprints on the water bottle? Is it just about Jessy's statement, the defendant's statements? How are they connecting all of these dots? Well, that's what the evidence and testimony is for. But the roadmap has been laid out. The state very clearly is saying Jessy planned this. She took all the money Lynn had, and when the last amount could only be had after Lynn was gone and Lynn was no good to her anymore and worth more dead than alive, which is what the state says, that's when she intended to end her life and made it look like a suicide with the powder and the pills and all that stuff. Now, they didn't say she forced her to take the pills, but she laced a bottle of water with Visine, knowing it was lethal based on Google searches and conversations with her boyfriend that happened before the medical examiner ever said anything. That's how we know Jessy knew and did this on purpose. The defense's argument is, I don't care how much Visine Jessy would have put in the water. It couldn't have killed her. Lynn was drinking Visine all the time on her own, with or without Jessy. And what actually killed her was the pills, which everybody seems to agree in this courtroom that Lynn did voluntarily, mixing it with alcohol and pills that she should not have had in a dosage that she should not have had. So that's just kind of an overview of what this case is going to be. We will break down the witnesses and the evidence if it is something you guys are interested in. Let me know in the comments if you are, or if we should just move it to the next one. Hit that like button to let me know as well. I appreciate everybody joining me. Until next time, I am out of here. Thanks for watching another episode of The Lawyer You Know. If you enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and share with your friends who might be interested here on YouTube. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to our channel. You can also follow us on all social media, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, @LawyerYouKnow. But on Instagram, we are still @TragosLaw. So look us up on there. And don't forget to listen to the Lawyer You Know podcast, available on all major podcast platforms. If you have a case you want to talk to us about, if it's a personal injury case, wrongful death, catastrophic injury, car accident, or slip and fall case, please email us, lawyeryouKnow@gmail.com. Of course, all of these links I just mentioned are included in the description below on this episode and every episode. So until next time, this is Peter Tragos, the Lawyer You Know.